Our first guest this afternoon is Morrow Wilson, one of the great names, I think. If that were not really your name, Morrow, I would have selected that for you. That's amazing. He's a professional playwright, theatrical producer, actor, and author, which usually means unemployed. That description right there.
I have a number of ways to starve to death,
Yeah.
or strike it rich.
You never know.
You never know.
Well, being here is not going to help with the latter, I don't think. Although you do have a great book out called David Sunshine, which I read yesterday.
Bless
a
your
novel of the
heart.
communications industry. I particularly appreciate that there were so many pictures in there, so I was able to flip pages quickly. No.
It's a quick read, isn't it? And a damn nice one too.
Well, it's cool. Well, actually, let's get back to that because I did want to talk about a couple of things. Now, it says here you're a direct descendant of a signer of both the Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution. Is this just a bold-faced lie, or?
God, I wish it were.
Oh, yeah.
The fact of the matter is, this guy was one of only six people who signed both those documents.
Really? And who was it?
His name was James.
Okay.
Jim Wilson.
There you go.
You've heard of him, right?
Jimmy Wilson, as he
Jimmy
was known
Wilson
to
played second base
Aaron
for
Burr, I believe.
Right.
They were buddies.
Third base for the Detroit Tigers for a long time, and he was good. And he was a charter member of the Supreme Court. And he had a lot of crazy radical ideas, like we should elect senators directly.
Who would have thought
which
that?
we didn't even do till 1913 or something like that. He thought that since we're taking all the Indians' land, that we should give them a college education. So his statue stands on the campus of Carlisle College, which
Really?
was the Indian school.
And of
The
course,
school
Jim
that
Thorpe,
Jim
the famous
Thorpe went
football
there,
player.
right?
That's about all I know, by the way. So.
Yeah, that's well.
We have exhausted my entire historical knowledge.
Here's the most important thing about James Wilson. The reason he's not a famous founding father is he died about 3 steps ahead of the sheriff. I mean, he was unable. He died actually in an inn on the outskirts of Washington. He was supposed to go as a Supreme Court justice to the court for the new session. But he knew that if he crossed the border, he would be arrested for debt. You see.
So you are a direct descendant then?
Stand-up guy.
You can see it. I mean, those of you who have pictures on your radio, you can see it.
That's along with the haircut we were talking about earlier. You know what's hilarious, though, about the Declaration of Independence, I think, is if,
I've been laughing about it for years.
It's such a funny document, isn't
Really,
it?
I know.
Jerry Seinfeld did an update on it.
Some of that stuff is old, though, you know.
But if you notice, John Hancock gets up there and says, "Give me that pen. I'll show you his signature." You want to see his signature? And he puts this big one. Then there's these other guys that sign it so small. I hope that they don't recognize the name. They probably misspelled their names on purpose. If the British find out about this, King George is going to have me hung. So you see these tiny, tiny little signatures alongside. That's about as funny as I plan to be about the Declaration of Independence.
Actually, it's interesting because
we're going to do an entire show on that, I think.
Because it was your death warrant. You were a traitor if you signed that. There were only 3 guys who had enough courage from Pennsylvania to sign the Declaration of Independence: Benjamin Franklin, Jonathan Morton, and James Wilson.
Jimmy Wilson.
Them three. That's all there was.
So it says in your bio that your dad was a writer.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Perfectly true. He wrote book upon book upon book. He was what you call a hack writer. Yeah.
Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It is
not in
now.
his case.
It is now, but I think there was a time when it really meant prolific too.
Also, he could make a living. It was an era when you could actually, make a living as a writer.
I was curious. Was he full time? Is that how he raised all of you?
All he ever did. He was a reporter to begin with, and then he began to write books, and he wrote for every magazine that you can imagine. And I was surprised. I didn't know how many books he'd written.
Yeah.
I thought he wrote about 3 dozen. And I was looking myself up on Google one day.
And who doesn't?
Oh, it's more fun than anything, isn't it? Well, there are a couple of things that are more fun than that.
Yeah.
But
anyway, you were never actually indicted, right? That was just that was a rumor.
Just never mind about that. Okay. And I saw these books, but with his name on them, and so he's written many more books than I ever will, but mine are serious literary books.
Yeah, well,
which make you laugh. See, already he's laughing.
Yeah.
You're like,
David Sunshine.
You're laughing.
No, I am
You're
laughing.
Yeah,
so were you, as a child,
you're not
though?
laughing, are you?
Not yet.
I mean,
Paul, you better laugh.
that had to be a real high
Start
wire
laughing.
act, though. Raising a family as a writer, I just can't imagine. It must have been very difficult. Were you aware of the fact as a child that maybe your dad really had to struggle to put everything together
Sure.
financially for all of you?
Absolutely, because he was crazy as can be. I mean, he was always leaving places. You know, the way Republican vice presidents used to leave Latin America. You know, with the city in flames and the airplane is taking off. You know, he just didn't get on with people at all. You know, I had what you call a nomadic childhood. Yes.
But you have a fascinating background yourself. I mean, you've done basically almost everything you can do in show business. Talk about, did it start with the acting or the writing, or what came first? What were you doing?
No, it started.
Or the bartending? I don't remember. Which was it?
Well, there's a lot of stuff you end up doing, which I don't want to talk about. But I began as I was always going to be a novelist. That was always what I was going to be. But I knew you couldn't make a living as a novelist to begin with, so I became a producer. I worked for David Susskind.
Wow.
Which is the basis of the book David Sunshine.
Yeah.
And it was a very, very interesting time. It was the beginning of the 60s, which was a really optimistic, glorious time. I mean, everyone was happy, and everybody said everyone was very open. I mean, even you know, you think about even the serious stuff that was going on, like the Freedom Riders and all that.
Yeah.
You know, Martin Luther King believed that we could, at that moment, change everything. So everyone had this optimism that was astonishing. And so I decided to write a book about a kid who is extremely optimistic, and who comes, and I wanted to make him as innocent as possible, so I had him come from Arkansas, farm boy, and he goes and he gets a job with David Sunshine, which kind of sounds like David Susskind.
Yeah.
And it really was my story, because everything in it was everything in it happened, and but it's a novel because it's literary, and
well, there's a little feeling of Mad Men to it, I think, in terms of the era. Anyway, we're speaking with Morrow Wilson, who's the author of a book called David Sunshine, a novel of the communications industry. There it is.
That's correct.
But you know, I think it does, and I agree with you. Someone asked me not that long ago if I could have relived any of my decades. God knows I have way too many of them now. It was much better when I had a choice of 2. You know. And now I have a choice of 7. That's not good. But I would have picked, you know, if it worked out that way, the late 50s, early 60s.
It was a wonderful time.
And I think you're right. I think because, at least for those of us who were fortunate enough to have parents who, you know, making a living and keeping things moving forward, there was tremendous optimism. My brother and I were going to go to college, you know, and good things were happening. I think that, you know, we're coming up on the 50th anniversary of the death of JFK, and maybe that was the beginning of the turn in the other direction. But up until then,
yeah.
I think that, you know, things felt very optimistic.
I think things really happened when I remember JFK saying, because I do remember this. I wasn't old enough to vote for him, but I do remember his saying at one point that the average family, the average American family, lived on happily. And that's a 4-person family, you know, 2 kids and the parents lived very well on $100 a week, $5,200 a year. And it was like that, and it was like a glorious time in the sense that school teachers went to Europe every year. You could buy a fantastic bottle of French wine for $3. Clothes.
We still sell those at our restaurants, but they're not so fantastic anymore. I refuse to pay more than 4. 3 seems about the right, and $3.50.
Yeah, well.
But you're absolutely right.
You're
I mean, I had cousins in Levittown, New York, and I thought that was an amazing place to go visit. It was our closest cousins. You know, every house sort of looked the same, but it was a miracle that in these potato fields of Long Island that all of a sudden popped up all these places. My uncle was a house painter, and we talked about our family, how when we would watch TV and see these wonderful emotional stories about these families who were the first generation that would go to college, and we'd be, oh, isn't that a wonderful story? My brother and I were the first ones in our family to go to college, but we assumed it was going to happen. You know, we were children of privilege before privilege arrived.
Well,
I think in a lot of ways. My dad was a longshoreman.
We were told something, which was really something that everyone believed, and now everyone's very upset about. They go like, well, we're going to be the first generation that leave our children less well off than we were. Well, you know, where is it written that it was only during that time, you know, from the Depression through the post-war boom through the early 60s, that you could guarantee that everyone was going to do better than I mean, it certainly wasn't true
Yeah.
in the beginning of the 20th century. It wasn't true in the 19th century. Wasn't true in the 18th century. But that's how it was. And it was very wide open. I can remember, when I began as a producer, and if I wanted to talk to Paul Newman or Celeste Holm or I mean, they're all gone now, but these wonderful actors, I would subscribe to Celebrity Service for $30 a month. They would tell you everybody's phone number. They would tell you where they were. There was a lady named Roz Starr who ran Star Service who could tell you not only Brando's number and his address, but where he was right now.
And she had no GPS. I mean, amazing.
Right. And so you'd call people up and they'd say, "Hi, how are you?" And you say, "Well, I'm a producer. You never heard of me, but I'd like you to be in this show." And they'd say, "Sure, why not?" Except for Rod Steiger. He didn't want to. He said, "Well, that sounds really good for you. It's not really good for us." But he was married to Claire Bloom.
Between you and me.
She softened things.
Twilight Zone used to scare the hell out of me on Friday nights. I think it was on Friday at 8 o'clock or something. It used to scare the heck out of me.
Well, it was so glorious. And then of course, terrible things began to happen. I mean, the decade of love. I mean, we ended up with cities in flames, and race riots, and
some of them weren't in this country either.
And all this stuff. But this was not that. At this point, everybody thought things are going to get better, and it was a very. I mean, Americans have gotten a lot more afraid, I think.
And I apologize for bringing this up at the very end, because we could talk to you for hours. We really could. I think you're fascinating. But you were married to Rue McClanahan, the great comedian.
Yes. I think the greatest comedian in the English-speaking world while she was alive. Yeah, sad. I miss her terribly.
I bet.
We were married for 12 years, and she'd had 5.
That's probably about as much as she could take you.
It was. She ended up dying.
It's an amazing number. I think I would have said the over/under was somewhere around 8.5.
I knock people off right and left. I mean, you can marry me, but don't ever try to divorce me. You'll die. But she actually, we were married for 12 years, which she'd been married 5 times before.
Really?
And she says in her autobiography that we were married longer than than the other 5 put together. Which might be true. It certainly was true by the time she died. Yeah.
Wow. Well, Morrow, we're so grateful for you being here. Morrow Wilson, he's got a great book out called David Sunshine. Look for it, buy it, and make it worthwhile for him to be here with us this afternoon, because if you don't buy his book, why were you here?
Exactly.
Thanks, Morrow.